Welcome back. I'm here today with Hal Kellman, the Kellman Family Office. And Hal, welcome to today's show.
Thank you.
So Hal, for the listeners, can you give the background of how you got where you are today? And let's start way back at the beginning for you and your life.
Okay, so the beginning is when I was born, and I was born in the South Bronx. And as I found out later in life, I lived 6 blocks away from Cole and Powell, and we both lived there in 1953, 4, and 5. But the important thing is, when I was born, we only had 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and there were 6 of us. And I realized that I wanted to do something more and different in life. And my grandfather had come to this country in steerage in 1911. He worked in the garment industry. My father dropped out of high school in 11th grade. He worked in the garment industry. And they both said, son, the Kellmans do not go to college. And I said, I'm going to go to college. And they said, we have no money for you. And I said, well, I'll do it on my own. So that was the beginning, and I realized that I had to do things on my own. And so I've always liked entrepreneurs, and specifically people who want to do something to change the world. And that's my main theme, doing something and doing it on your own.
You know, it's amazing. Against all odds, you didn't have the history and the support system, basically, from those ahead of you. But in that inner drive, you were feeling something. Where did you end up, pursuing your, college education?
Yeah, as it turns out. So the one thing I didn't have was money, and I had a specific goal, and it wasn't that hard. It was to have enough money for food, clothing, shelter, and a little fun. And so when I started out in life, I didn't have that. And I decided that I wanted to do something on my own and not work for a big corporation like my father did. He worked 40 years for a company, and they gave him a pension after 40 years of $10 a month for each year. So his pension, besides getting a crappy salary, his pension was only $400 a month, and it was fixed, and it ended when he died. So that was the other end of what happens with corporations, and that's the part that I saw. And so I didn't like big corporations.
Now, you took a degree in electrical engineering.
So here's what happens. Okay, so it's interesting. Life is interesting. You never know what's going to happen, but you can have long-range goals. And my big thing is strategy. Mm-hmm. I feel most comfortable with long-term strategy, usually looking out a decade, and tactics to get there. So my goal was to go to school in New York, because it was free, mm-hmm. CCNY, and then work in the Northeast, go to work for IBM. Okay, so New York City had a promise for every high school graduate with a B or better grade, you can go to CCNY for free. And I said, okay, that's my way out. So I had an 87 average. They did it in numbers instead of averages. And I thought, okay, 4 years, I don't have to pay for anything. They lost my application. And
oh, no.
My parents wouldn't come down to support me, so I took my 15 cents token, went down to the office, and I told them, and they said, son, you didn't file it on time, get out of here. So I didn't know whether or not I would ever go to college. And everyone I went to school with graduated in June, and I didn't know what I was going to do.
So you, so fast forwarding now, you ended up after your degree coming out to California.
So what happened was there was one college in the country, Michigan College of Mining and Technology, that had an August 31st application deadline. Mm-hmm. So I applied to them in July. I got a scholarship for undergraduate, and then went to the University of Michigan for my MBA. So electrical engineering MBA, and I stayed in Ann Arbor for another 10 years. So I didn't come to Silicon Valley until 1978.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what finally drove you to come out here from Michigan?
So there I am in snowy Ann Arbor, and I read electronic news all the time. And Ted Hoffler wrote a 2-part series about Silicon Valley, and also Intel had an advertisement about the 4004 family microprocessors. And I saw that and I said, wow, this is going to change the world. And everyone, including my wife, said I was crazy. And that was November 15th, 1971. And my wife's family was in Detroit, and she wanted to stay there. So I had to wait for them the family to leave and, go to Florida like most people do from New York or Detroit when they retire. And I also had a company. I started a little company in Ann Arbor with $3,000. There were 3 of us. And we took $1,000 each for a software company. And we built it up. I worked 14, 15 hours a day, 7 days a week for 10 years, sold the company to 3M, and moved out here. So that was the genesis. So I had to have my wife's family move and my company get bought.
So in your first company, it was basically a $3,000 investment. And the show's followed by a lot of entrepreneurs and aspiring people. And no one really knows the full history of your story yet, but I want to go back to $3,000 net worth investment in there. What was your big break? How did you get this company off the ground?
Silicon Valley, Hewlett and Packard. They were great people. So there I was. The $3,000 came from the 3 founders, $1,000 each, and we needed to get computer equipment. Back then, it was mini computers. We had just gone from mainframes, the IBM mainframes, to 80 different mini computer companies, and one of the newer ones was Hewlett Packard. So I came out here to try to get either Hewlett Packard 2114s and 2116s or Varian equipment. So my first stop in Palo Alto, luckily both of them were here in Palo Alto, was Varian. And the first question the guy from Varian asked me is, son, how old are you? And I said, 25. Second question, what's your net worth? I said, $3,000 for the company. He says, get out of here. So luckily, the second company I went to was Hewlett Packard down the road, and they just took out a purchase order. They said, how much equipment would you like? I thought of the biggest number I could, $100,000 worth of equipment. He wrote that down. He said, how long do you want to pay? I said 60 days because I knew we can program in 27. They gave us $100,000 worth of equipment, 60 days to pay, and that's why we were successful because of Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard.
The dreams of Silicon Valley are were alive and well back then. But Hal, I need to take a quick break, and when we get back after these messages, I want to jump into your exit strategy on this first company, then where you went from there. We'll be right back after these messages. Since you can't take your wealth with you, spend time with your family. Welcome back. I'm visiting here today with Hal Kellman, the Kellman Family Office. And Hal, before the break, we ended off with your first big win in the company was an order coming in from Silicon Valley, Hewlett Packard, $100,000. You were able to use that as a scaling point to the company, and then eventually you sold out. How many years was it till you got to the point where you went over to 3M?
Okay, so I was independent, working for, the company was ISI, Interactive Systems Incorporated. Mm-hmm. So I built it with 2 other people from startup 3,000 to 4 million in revenue, 400,000 in earnings, and then we sold the company to 3M because they wanted to get into factory automation.
And so, bring us fast forward. What year was this now?
This was 1978. Okay. And as soon as I sold the company, I moved out here.
It's interesting. 78. It's still Silicon Valley was still just starting. You move out here though. Were you still with the company, or did you take the exit strategy and say, "I'm going to go do something else now"?
No, I didn't know anyone. That's the whole thing. I've always been an explorer, and people kidded me about that my whole life. And when I would tell people about Silicon Valley for the 8 years that I lived in Michigan and I was going to Silicon Valley for different conferences, they would always call me Marco Polo. And as it turns out, I have a private investment in the company, and I didn't name it, but the co-founder did, Marco Polo Learning. So it's funny, some things in life are, destined. So Marco Polo, the explorer, doing different things. So I knew no one in Silicon Valley, came out here, and there were regional brokerage firms. And the two best were Robertson Stevens and Hambrecht and Quist. And I said, these are my type companies. And so I dealt with them. And again, still 1978. 77 was the bad 70s. Hambrecht and Quist had only done 2 IPOs. 78, they did 7. I bought 5 of them. I really liked it. And I said, boy, I found gold. And I bought Avantec, Cullinet, Evans Sutherland, Paradigm, and Zydex, 5 of their 7 deals, and the worst one went up 10 times in value. I said, "This is it. This is my type of company." And
so you found a knack for really getting in, doing the research, and evaluating value in companies.
Yeah, early.
Yeah.
So I should have been a venture capitalist, but I didn't have the contacts. So essentially, I've been a public venture capitalist all my life, buying companies that are 5 or 10 million in revenue, which you could have done from 1969 when I started until 1999.
So, Hal, I understand it wasn't just picking the stocks, but you also began to do some writing and as an analyst for some magazines in early Silicon Valley companies. How did you get into that?
Again, nothing is easy. There was a new magazine that was started in 1989 called Upside Magazine, and the people who started it were from Stanford. So the first person who did what I wanted to do was from Stanford. Luckily, he was so bad that I got a call from the co-founder of Upside, Tony Perkins, and he said, "Hal, I saw a couple of your articles that you had written for Detroit Discovery. Do you think you can do this for our new magazine?" And the companies I had written up for Detroit Discovery when I was still in Michigan went up an average 70%.
Oh my gosh, 70%?
70, yes.
Then you were you must have had a pretty good following by that time. So.
Well, the interesting thing is, it was Michigan, and all my clients in Michigan were either doctors, dentists, or osteopaths, and they drove me crazy. And so I realized that in order for me to do my own thing, I have to have my own way of looking at it, and I can't do what everyone else did. And the thing that changed was 73, 74, when everyone went down, and I had my first double-digit loss. And I said, this is crazy. If I'm going to continue, I want to do it my way. And I changed my approach.
Hal, I need to take a quick break. Visiting here today with Hal Kellman, he of the Kellman Family Office. And when we get back, I want to talk about when you look at companies, and how do you assess undervalued, underperforming, or companies that are ready to take off. So we'll be right back after these messages.
I love fishing, with my family.
I think it would be easier to use a net.
It was so much fun.
The times when we are together, it makes it all the more worth it.
Having Dad teach them how to cast a fly rod, and
as long as we're doing stuff together, we're having fun.
Some people see a father and a son fishing together, while others see a succession plan. Welcome back. I'm visiting here today with Hal Kellman of the Kellman Family Office. And Hal, for the listeners, you have I'll just say this, you have a pretty good reputation for picking good stocks and good investments over the years. But how did you come about that? Is it you got some type of system or process where you're saying this is how I know I want to be with this company, or what do you look at for criteria?
Okay, so the two main areas I focus in is what I know because I studied it or was interested in it. So initially, because of electrical engineering, I really know hardware and software. And it used to be IBM and the Seven Dwarfs. And I always look for companies that can become the next big success. And if something is already known and it's followed by 40 analysts, I'm not interested in that. So I try to find something, usually because of technology. It's either misunderstood or early or groundbreaking, and it's the cutting edge technology.
So it's basically you're able to predict those trends and follow through. Has your philosophy stayed the same, or has it changed over the years as technology has evolved?
Basically, it's the same thing, but it's evolved because the world changes. So it's always been, for the last 25 years, 40% of what I do is technology, hardware and software. The companies change. 20% is healthcare because I'm interested in that. And the other 40% is still miscellaneous. And I tried to get it down to a system, but it's still a personal type thing where you just can't have a formula. I do have formulas, but that's only one club in my golf bag there. I don't play golf, so I'm trying to figure out an analogy. Just one club.
Well, I want to jump into healthcare a little bit because obviously a lot in the news with the Affordable Care Act, a revamping. You saw the Theranos has been over there, the blow up of the business model or valuation. But and then there's a lot of companies that are coming out saying, well, the new solution is wellness. It's rather than reactive medicine, it's preventing things up front. Where do you see the trend really going? Do you see wellness as a something alive and well that will, because we're obviously trying to disrupt the current system and move on? Or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, more generally, my emphasis is on genomics, and it wasn't until we cracked the genome, and that took $3 billion and more than a decade to just get the first science. And then it's the same thing in technology. It takes 15, 20 years to understand the science, and then over the course of time, you get the companies. So if you were the first person to get your genome tested, it would have cost $3 billion. Then it went down to 100,000. When it broke 10,000, I was one of the first 5,000 people to get my own whole genome tested. And there's a company in San Diego that did that, Illumina. I went down there, and they made sure you talked to a doctor for an hour before they would do the test, because if you had some serious disease, they didn't want you to go off and kill yourself or do something stupid. So the good news is I got tested for 1,200 diseases, and I have no extra chance of getting any of the 12, just average or better, so I should live to be 89.
So when you look at a person wanting to jump into the investment industry today, what advice would you give them?
I would tell them, the interesting thing is it hasn't changed that much in 300 years. And people kid about Jack Ma when he talks about Forrest Gump. My hero is Benjamin Franklin. 300 years ago, he was America's first entrepreneur. 1706, he only had 2 years of formal education, didn't have any money. He essentially ran away from his family. He lived in the number one population city and went to the number two, Philadelphia, to make his own way. And he did a whole bunch of things, entrepreneurial things, and spent the first 42 years of his life making money, and then the last 42 giving it away. But he had so many things that he did. I've read different accounts of him, and I had to read several accounts to get the full story. But one of the greatest things was that's the first time I understood the miracle of compound growth by listening to Ben Franklin's story. He willed 1,000 pounds to each of his cities, Philadelphia and Boston, with the proviso that none of the money could be spent for 200 years. So the first city, the lawyers always get involved and screw things up. They reinterpreted it and they opened it up in 100 years. That only made $2 million. The other one was the full 200 years. 1990 was $5 million. So from 1,000 pounds to $2 million or 5 million, Miracle of Compound Growth. And that is underestimated. People talk about it, but they don't realize compound growth for 10, 15, 20 years, anyone today could get rich.
It shows his brilliance, too, and in foresight. So if you're looking back at courses that you enjoyed the most in college, or what would that be? Where's your passion for learning?
As it turns out, my passion, besides electrical engineering and finance, it was really history. The best courses I took were at the University of Michigan, but it was not in the finance. I took 2 history courses. One was the entrepreneur in history, and the other one was in economic history of the United States. And they had 24 specialized libraries, and I went back to each of the 24 libraries that had different parts of things I was interested in. And I realized most of the history books are wrong because they're written by people after the event and they reconstruct it. So what I learned was most of the entrepreneurs were really self-taught, and they dropped out at that time of high school, and now they drop out of college or graduate school. So there's a certain entrepreneur personality that I learned to follow, and my biggest successes have been by investing in those type people.
You know, how when you look at the history books, if you could choose any time to live in the era of time, when would that be?
My ideal time would be 1450 to 1525, and living in Florence, Italy, with the Medici family, because they financed, so many great things with the Renaissance, and had they must have had great dinner conversations with Leonardo da Vinci and Rembrandt and all the great people, Copernicus, around the dinner table.
Hal, we're out of time today, but I appreciate you being on today's show. And I've been visiting here today with Hal Kellman of the Kellman Family Office. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back. Over the break, I was visiting with Hal, and there was Hal Kellman, and there was a little app called Marco Polo, Hal, that you mentioned. I want to hold this over the last segment because I think it'd be of great interest to the to the listeners out there. But tell me about this app. Is one of your first software?
This was my first private investment, and essentially there are 2 million apps in the App Store. And so you think, an app, what chance do you have? But this is in early childhood education, and the person who developed it is a great entrepreneur, and it got picked up by Apple and featured a year ago as the app of the week. We got 3 million downloads.
Wow.
And as we speak now, we've got 5 million people who have purchased it. It is the #1 early childhood education program in the world. And we just got what purportedly is the richest man in Hong Kong and the second richest man in Asia. All I know is he's worth more than $30 billion, and that's Horizon Ventures, and he just put money in the company. So he thinks we can do great things, and we're going to do more things besides apps. We're going to have a Marco Polo Academy, and we're going to have half-hour programs that are going to be sold to one of the early childhood education channels.
And this is all in early childhood development. Is it like videos, or what do they get with the app there?
Okay, it's learning. It's different areas, and essentially there are 400 million kids in the world who don't have access to early childhood education, and that's one of my passions, to give people equal access and have an opportunity if you're not born into the right family or zip code. And so, as it turns out, all over the world, people are buying that because you don't even have to know English. We do have it in 8 different languages, but little kids start playing with it, and grandparents buy this for their grandchildren. And you learn about ocean, you learn about weather and recall, and then there's a newer app, I forget the name. So we got 4 apps now that are selling, but we're going to expand and use the best characters from this into the TV program called The Polos.
And how many languages is this in?
Last I checked with Justin Sue, it was in 8 different languages.
Wow.
And it's worldwide.
So to find it, you go to the App Store
And
and
right.
type in
Marco Polo Learning.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is there an initial trial period? I mean, do you have 2 phases of a trial app and then
It's only like $2.99.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Plus, I think they have a 3-pack. If you buy the 3, you get a little discount.
It's amazing with technology that what it is doing is it's driving learning down to earlier ages and making it available where it wasn't before with this technology and giving kids the opportunity to.
Right. Before it was CD-ROMs, and when I was writing for Upside, I wrote up 2 learning companies that sold CD-ROMs. You may remember Where in the World is Carmen, San Diego?
Yeah.
And then Westward Wagons. So one of the companies was Learning Company, and the other one was Broderbund. Both of them were bought by the guy who's on Shark Tank, Mr. Wonderful O'Leary. There were a couple $100 million. He bought it and he sold it to Mattel for $4 billion.
Oh my gosh!
That's his.
I used to play that wagon.
My
game.
kids actually did the pre-testing. Learning Company was in Fremont. They would give them cola, which my wife didn't like, cola and pizza, and they'd test all those things when they were a small little company in Fremont.
Well, how fun! Well, Hal, we're out of time. But it's been a real pleasure having you on today's show. Any final words for the listeners?
Probably if I had to buy one book, I wouldn't buy any of the new books. Philip A. Fisher. He actually was the originator, along with T. Rowe Price, of growth stocks. And in 1958, he wrote Uncommon Values and Common Stocks. And I read that when I was in business school, and it's more than 50 years later. The only thing I would change is unit trust to mutual fund. And he was a great growth stock investor and told people how to do it.
Been visiting here today with Hal Kellman of the Kellman Family Office. Thanks for being with us.